I want to draw your attention to some things that Tyson Fury recently said about Anthony Joshua, because I do think he makes a couple of good points here. So he said that, to quote him, he said, "I think Usyk is too cute for him, too smart, too quick, and a southpaw. I think with Robert Garcia trying to train him to go on the front foot and be aggressive will only enable Usyk to land more often. I don't see it, but then again, what do I know? In heavyweight boxing, it only takes one punch. It wasn't a complete landslide last time. Usyk had a lot of marks on his face and was cut up. He's not hard to hit, Usyk. He's right there in front of you. So obviously, Joshua can land a big punch on him. Anyone can win a fight, as we've seen many, many times. It's a good time to beat Usyk now because he's been at war for however long. If he was ever going to be off the ball, now is the time. I just think that Usyk's too good of a boxer for AJ, and I don't think AJ has got the ability to pressurize him for 12 rounds, drag him into a dogfight and knock him out. You have to be an elite, special human being for that, and I don't think Joshua possesses that will to win to do that. He's happy to come second place. He's too easily happy to come second position. If you're willingly settled for second, say no more." Those are the words of the Gypsy King Tyson Fury. And very often you get hyperbole from Fury, particularly regarding his rivals, and outright lies a lot of the time. But in this instance, I tend to think that what he said was very reasonable. And I think he has a point regarding AJ's mentality. Now, as far as what he said about Usyk just being too cute and too good of a boxer for AJ, I think a lot of people feel that way based on what they saw first time around, and also based on Usyk's pedigree, all the things he's done previously as a pro and also as an amateur. But the main point I want to focus on here is what Tyson Fury said regarding AJ being willing to accept second place. He doubts AJ's will to win. He doesn't think that he has the elite level, what's the word I'm looking for? Mentality, the elite level desire, the elite level determination. I'll go a step further and say that it might even be a lack of elite level ego. I've spoken about this in several recent videos. The ego is an extremely important thing in many walks of life, but particularly in professional boxing at the elite level. Your ego, at least in relation to your fighting ability, I'm not saying your ego in relation to every aspect of your life and every aspect of your personality, but your ego in relation to your fighting ability has to be absolutely astronomical to succeed at the elite level in boxing. Don't be fooled by the public personas of people like Manny Pacquiao, Gennady Golovkin, and so on. You cannot get in the ring and be as vicious as Manny Pacquiao and as determined as him. I mean, look at his performance in the final fight with Marquez, where he'd been dropped, but yet he was still viciously attacking Marquez. In fact, that's what got him knocked out. Look at Gennady Golovkin. All the nice boy and the smiles and, good boy, all this kind of stuff. Gets in the ring, he's fracturing eye sockets. He's got daggers in his eyes. He looks like a man possessed. This doesn't come out of nowhere, folks. This lives inside these fighters who act like they're nice guys and all this kind of stuff. This is in them all the time. They just keep it chained and restrained for the sake of PR, right? And for the sake of, I guess, getting along with people socially. But that beast is within. And that beast is comprised of an extremely large ego. I mean, again, in relation to their fighting ability. I remember watching a great documentary, which is available on YouTube, I believe now, and has been for many years. But I first watched it back in, I want to say the late 80s, early 90s, whenever it first came out. And it's called Champions Forever. And this was a documentary about the heavyweight scene in the 1970s, involving Muhammad Ali, George Foreman, Joe Frazier, Ken Norton, etc. And it has all of them in the studio. Well, I don't think they're all in the studio at the same time, but they all had their time in the studio to talk about their fights and their careers and all this kind of thing. And at the end of the documentary, actually during the credits, you have this dinner scene where you have all the legends, Ali, Foreman, Frazier, Norton, Holmes. They're all around the table having dinner, reminiscing about the old days. But anyway, during the part of the documentary where it's showing and going over the rumble in the jungle between Foreman and Ali, Foreman recalls a moment in that fight in the early rounds where he hit Ali so hard in his chest that it literally dehumanized him. That's the way that Foreman described hitting Ali. He said, I hit him so hard that it dehumanized him. And understand, I've been over this in previous videos, understand that George Foreman, Mike Tyson, and Deontay Wilder are three of the hardest punchers to have ever fought for the World Heavyweight Championship. This is commonly accepted. All three of them have publicly spoken about their intention to catch a body in the ring. And they were all very serious about it. Foreman has spoken about this actually in recent years. He said that when he was young, he was literally trying to take somebody's life in the ring. That was what was on his mind when he was hitting people. He was trying to end their life. Mike Tyson, same thing. Deontay Wilder, same thing. This is not a coincidence, folks. The mind controls the body. In order for people to have that extreme level of punching power, in many cases, and not all cases, I'm not saying all cases, but in many cases, an extreme mindset is required in order to be able to generate that kind of power. It's not just about technique. It's not just about natural heavy-handedness, balance, and rotate. It's not just about those things. There's another level to punching power, the elite level, where these guys are, the Foremans and the Tysons and the, hope I don't see, I think I said Foreman, Tyson, and Wilder originally. But yeah, there's an elite level of punching power where these guys go and their mentality takes them there. An extreme mentality of inflicting extreme damage on their opponents. The most extreme form of damage, okay? So I'm realistic about what boxing is. I don't get all upset when fighters like Tyson or Foreman or even Wilder come out and say that they've really got bad intentions in the ring. Right, what do you think Customado meant by bad intentions, folks? Now, as far as I'm concerned, that's a euphemism for what I'm talking about. Yeah? And obviously, I don't want to see people lose their lives in the ring, but that's why you have doctors, referees, cornermen, etc., so that irrespective of what the fighter's intentions are, we don't end up with fatalities that often in boxing, thankfully, because we have these safeguards in place. But anyway, that's an aside. I got sidetracked there, as I often do with nostalgia. But no, the point I'm making here is Foreman was a murderous puncher. This guy would hit people and not only destroy them physically, but he would destroy them psychologically. He would go in there and hit you so hard in the chest and the arm that you didn't even want to imagine what it was like to get hit in the head. Because you knew that you'd be in a different universe if this guy managed to catch you clean with a headshot. So he would intimidate people when he hit them. But with Muhammad Ali, that's not what he got. Typically, he hits a guy in the chest like that, dehumanizes him, and they're intimidated now. They don't want no parts of it. He said that Ali looked at him with defiance and actually, I forget how exactly the wording, but he basically described Ali looking at him almost like he was offended. Like, how dare you hit me like that? Who the hell do you think you are? This is Ali's psychological response to getting hit like that. Most guys would be like, oh my God, what's going on here? I've never been hit like that before. Ali was like, who the hell do you think you are? Oh, retribution is coming for you, you fool. See, this is the ego. This is why ego is so important. And of course, Muhammad Ali had a colossal ego. Colossal, right? It's necessary at this level in boxing to have that kind of ego. When Floyd Mayweather got rocked in that second round against Shane Mosley, look at Mayweather's body language. He didn't look like a guy that was panicking, did he? He didn't look like a guy who was feeling sorry for himself. You know, when AJ got dropped by Ruiz, he looked like a deer in the headlights. He looked like a guy who was feeling sorry for himself, who was lost and confused. Mayweather didn't have that look about him when he got hurt by Mosley, did he? He was a punch or two away from potentially getting knocked out. And yet Mayweather was defiant because that's his ego. His ego was like, nah, I'm not going to allow you to do this to me. Who the hell do you think you are? I'm Floyd Mayweather. You don't do this to me. You know what I mean? Almost like Alonzo, you know, in Training Day, Denzel Washington's character at the end of that film when he's in, I think, Compton, and he's being surrounded after the fight with Ethan Hawke's character where he gets shot. He's being surrounded by all these bloods, these gang members, and it looks like they're going to attack him. But then his ego arises and he starts, you know, grandstanding on them, and he actually manages to back them all off because he's so bold with his ego, right? And that's kind of how Mayweather was in that second round against Mosley. He was like, who the hell do you think you are? You ain't going to do this to me. And that's what got him through it. So the whole ego thing is a double-edged sword because boxing, fighting for a living, is not a normal thing. And that's why doing it at the elite level requires an abnormal mentality. So you can't always expect normal behavior out of people who are doing something which is very abnormal for a living and for a lifestyle. This ain't like your mate Billy from down the pub who used to do a bit of boxing back in the 1980s and was in the London ABA. It's very different. We're talking about elite level fighters here. Okay? And this often comes with an enormous ego, at least in relation to their fighting ability. Some of them might appear humble on the outside, but on the inside, they think that they are literally Kratos, the god of war. I mean, and how dare you have the audacity to stand? Even Mike Tyson, for example, after he beat Frank Bruno, in the press conference, or was it the press conference or was it the post-fight interview? I forget which. But he said words to the effect of, how dare these fighters challenge me with their primitive skills? That's what he said. Now, obviously, ego isn't enough. You have to also be diligent and meticulous when it comes to training and preparation. You have to be a very hard worker. Ego and talent is not going to be enough, but you can have talent, you can have work ethic like Anthony Joshua does. But if your ego isn't sufficiently colossal, then you're going to have a problem at the elite level in boxing more often than not. Because when you're in those dark places, in those, difficult situations like he was against Andy Ruiz, you can't start feeling sorry for yourself. You can't start looking at your trainer, oh, help me. No one's coming to help you. Right? As long as you're conscious and on your feet, you better figure it out. Right? Anthony Joshua wasn't able to figure it out in that fight. He got gobbled up. He didn't react psychologically the way you would want to see an elite fighter react. Tyson Fury, on the other hand, has always reacted exactly the way you'd want to see an elite fighter react. He's been dropped multiple times. Nobody had to coach him. They didn't have to bring a psychologist in to tell him, oh, you need to react this way or that way. It's just in him to react in the correct way as an elite fighter when he finds himself on the floor, when he finds himself in trouble. Now, with Anthony Joshua, I don't know whether it's necessarily a case of him not having a big enough ego in relation to his fighting ability. It could be that. Or it could also be him, well, this is what I really meant to say. I don't know whether Anthony Joshua doesn't want to be number one and doesn't care about winning in the way that Tyson Fury described. I don't know whether that's the case. It might be the case, but it might also be the case, alternatively, that he wants to be the best and he does care about winning, and losing really does cut him up. But he doesn't understand the psychological approach necessary to succeed at the elite level, which is, in my view, what I just described: the cultivation of the ego. In those tough times, you have to believe that no matter what this guy hits you with, you're the better man. How dare you even hit me? Do you know what I mean? Who do you think you are? Again, I go back to that Mayweather-Mosley round 2. Mayweather was just like sneering at Shane Mosley when Mosley was trying to knock him out, shaking his head, sneering at him, even when Mayweather's legs were all over the place. Right? But that's what kept Mayweather in there. That's why he didn't panic, because he trusted himself. He believed in himself to such an extreme extent, and he believed he was so much superior to Shane Mosley that he was like, nah, this is nothing. This guy is a fool. He can't do nothing to me. Yeah, he's caught me with a little shot here and there. He's getting all excited about it. He's an idiot. You watch what I'm going to do to him now. It's this kind of attitude. Anthony Joshua needs to have that kind of attitude. And maybe he didn't display that type of thing against Andy Ruiz because this stay humble ethos has actually started to sink in a bit with him. You know, when he first came out with this stay humble, stay hungry thing, right? I was like, okay, this is just a marketing situation where the public, particularly in Britain, don't tend to like egotism, overt egotism. So he's selling them this humble guy act, and that's more palatable, and you know, it'll make him more popular. And I think that was the case for a while. But training at the, what is it called? The British Institute of Sport, wherever he trains, with the Team GB and all this kind of stuff, that environment is full of all these backslappers. It's full of the British amateur mentality. And the British amateur mentality is not the same as in Eastern Europe, where from my understanding, it's a lot more tough. The British amateur setup with the Team GB and all that, it's the slaps on the back, jolly good show, oh, we're all great sportsmen and BBC sports person. You know what I mean? It's all very PC and sanitized. That's the energy that exists in these places. And I don't think that's an energy conducive to success at the elite level in boxing. I'm not saying that it's impossible for someone to come out of that environment and succeed at the elite level. And obviously AJ has succeeded at the elite level, but he's now run up against the wall, hasn't he? Where his mentality has meant that he's only gotten so far, and now he's started to lose fights in, not too far apart from each other at this stage. And there appears to be an issue with regards to his mindset. And I suspect that part of this is spending too much time around all these amateurs, around all these backslappers and the jolly good show, and oh, we're all great sportsmen here, and cheesy smiles and BBC interviews, all this type of thing. Obviously, this can't happen, but a great person for AJ to be with for this particular fight, I'm not saying for his whole career, but if you could go back in a time machine and get one trainer for Anthony Joshua for this particular fight. Now, again, ideally, I think AJ should take interim fights before facing Usyk again. But if that can't happen, and we have to get someone from back in history, in a time machine, to bring him back to the current day to train AJ for the Usyk fight, I would bring back Cus D'Amato. That's who I would bring back. Cus D'Amato, because he wasn't just a boxing trainer. Far more than that, he was a boxing psychologist. He understood the mind of fighters. Perhaps, let me not say more than any other trainer, but he definitely had one of the most exceptional understandings of boxing psychology that there's ever been in the sport. This man completely understood what made fighters tick and what to do, what buttons to push in order to get them to behave in a certain way. Now, not every fighter is going to be as receptive and as responsive to his methods, but many fighters were, okay? And of course, his magnum opus was Mike Tyson. And with Mike Tyson, he was literally trying to create a monster. That's what he was trying to create. Now, obviously, he had the raw materials. You know, Mike Tyson came from Brownsville, Brooklyn, and very deprived upbringing, very harsh and vicious environment. But there were lots of guys that came from that environment, and they still didn't have what Mike Tyson went on to have, you know, or what they still didn't become what Mike Tyson became. So a lot of this was Cus D'Amato's influence and his teaching and his psychological molding. And again, his intention was to create a monster in Mike Tyson, someone in the ring who was absolutely vicious, who was just terrifying the whole division. That's what he wanted to create. And the psychology behind that is throwing punches with bad intentions. As I said, previously, what are bad intentions? If bad intentions are just to knock people out, then you can just say throw punches to knock people out. But that's not what he said. He said throw punches with bad intentions. I think it was when Cus was still alive, Mike Tyson talked about trying to drive the nose bone up into the brain. Was that for the Jesse Ferguson fight? Was Cus still alive then, or did Cus die after that? But either way, that was a version of Mike Tyson who was very close to Cus. I'm not saying that it was as flowery and, perfect as many of the documentaries make out their relationship, but they were still very close. And Tyson had been imbued with a lot of Cus D'Amato's thought patterns and philosophies on fighting and philosophies on life. And he's coming out with stuff like this, driving nose bones up into brains and all this kind of thing. So the point I'm making here is, I think AJ needs to be around people who have a more extreme mentality. I think he needs to be around trainers and, other boxing people who have a mentality of trying to hurt the opponent, brutalize the opponent. Do you know what I mean? None of the nice guy, British Institute of Sport, backslapping, Jolly Good Show, BBC, Sally Gunnell, Chris Akabusi, Roger Black, what's the other guy called in Pinson? No, none of that nonsense. Spitting sawdust, mean mugging, vicious sparring sessions, at least for this fight. Yeah, this is the mentality that AJ needs in order to beat Usyk. And I'm not talking about him going out there just throwing caution to the wind and fighting reckless. No. But, the sensible aggression is going to need to have an extreme mentality behind it in order to be successful. A never say die warrior spirit where only rendering Usyk unconscious, not just stopping him, rendering unconscious on the canvas, only that is satisfactory. That should be the goal. That should be the mentality behind his performance. And you can't just hope to show up on the night and have that kind of mentality. You need to have that kind of mentality in training. The way you train is going to be the way that you fight. So you have to get yourself into that mindset all throughout camp. Even before camp. It's like with actors in Hollywood. They have certain actors, I forget the different classifications of acting methods. But there's one type of acting where, and different strokes for different folks, certain actors find that this works better for them. Daniel Day-Lewis, for example, is a guy who will go into character before they even start shooting. And he'll stay in character for long periods when he's not even on set. So when he was filming Gangs of New York, for example, Martin Scorsese, the director, would call him up. And it wouldn't be Daniel Day-Lewis that answered the phone. It would be Bill the Butcher. He'd be talking in that voice. He'd have that attitude and all this kind of thing. And on set, when he'd arrive in the morning, you know, dressed in his normal clothes as Daniel Day-Lewis, he wouldn't greet people as Daniel Day-Lewis. He'd greet people as Bill the Butcher and act like Bill the Butcher. And this was his method. Is method acting what they call that particular thing? Maybe it is. Again, I forget the different classifications of acting techniques, but this is similar to what many boxers do. Some guys, it's like a switch. They can be totally nice to everybody during camp, and then they get in the ring and the guy's a killer. But other guys can't do that. Other guys, perhaps even most guys, they need to, be in that mode, to get themselves in that mean fight mode long before they step in the ring. Sometimes before they even start camp. You see it. And that may be the case with Anthony Joshua. So we'll see how it goes, but I do think that Tyson Fury made a good point there, and that's my main point in this video. He made a good point about Anthony Joshua's mentality. He appears to be somebody that is happy with second place, and that could be the case. But it could also be the case that, no, he wants first place. He just doesn't know how to go about it psychologically. He maybe started buying into this little, what started out as potentially a fake mantra, stay humble, stay hungry. Maybe he started buying into that a bit too much. Humble is something you do not need to be in a boxing ring. Forget about that. Humble is for PR. When you're in that boxing ring, you better be as egotistical as humanly possible. Right? You're going in there to basically try and defeat the other man's ego. And to defeat the other man's ego, in many cases, your ego needs to be bigger than his. Yeah? Sometimes just, particularly if he's more skilled than you, you better go in there thinking that you're Kratos, God of War. Right? Because you're going to have to overcome a lot of obstacles in there. Anyway, I'll leave it there. Hopefully I've given you guys some food for thought. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. I'm out.